we say hi to State Senator Kelly Hancock. Welcome, sir. How are you doing, sir?
We're doing great. Thanks, Mark.
Very nice to have you. Anytime we have anybody, state legislature on, we kind of ask the broad question of how are things going? What's on your mind? But there is a particular story of a particular bill that passed yesterday overwhelmingly, and it had to do with COVID liability, pandemic liability protections. We've all been locked down in various ways, some states more than others, some states less than others, but there are concerns that business owners and employees have as they begin to open up. I've thought about this a lot. I've wondered what the landscape and what the marketplace is going to be like as businesses say, hey, everybody, come on back to work, as employees go, man, I can't wait to get back to work, or wow, do I even want to go back to work? And I remember asking a number of people, isn't this an atmosphere that's just rich for a litigious society, a lot of lawsuits and concerns? So describe for me what the concerns were and then what the bill does.
Well, let's start with your point. I mean, we've already seen 650 lawsuits filed in the state of Texas relating to COVID, and they vary literally across the board in industries. So during the interim, the questions that you had, Mark, were the same things that literally everyone I spoke to, whether it be healthcare workers or, restaurants, you just go through it. This was the number one question during the interim is, hey, are we going to have protections? Because, of course, as we typically see, the federal government talked about it, but they didn't do anything about it. And so it was one of our top priorities. It was a low bill number, which means it was a top priority with Lieutenant Governor. It was on the emergency item by the governor. And so we began working on this very, very early during the interim, and we wanted to make sure we got a huge cross-sections. I will tell you the first draft that we had did not include churches, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. We passed out of the Senate a constitutional amendment to make sure our churches were essential and protected to make sure they could open, but we wanted to protect them against any type of litigation as well, so we added them to the bill. And then we literally, what we did want to do is protect bad actors, so we actually worked with the Trial Lawyers Association. That's why you kind of saw the vote that you had. So we found a really good balance of protecting our businesses and our churches and our healthcare workers and our first responders, as well as making sure that, if there are bad actors out there, that the door is still open in order to address those issues.
Let's talk about what sort of the lawsuits were. They were, as you said, of a variety of types, but these 650 or so lawsuits, was there a common thread around most of them? What kind of suits were being filed, by whom, and to achieve what?
Well, they were pretty diversified, Mark, in different areas, and some it was employers and some it was customers and in different areas. So it was a cross-section, and it really did, with the 650, kind of cross different industries and different areas. And, some, I'm sure, will be legitimate, and we saw some, in studying for this, we saw that there were some bad actors. We saw businesses were in the meatpacking plants, where they were making wagers on how many people would come down with COVID. Well, that's not appropriate. We're not doing that. And so we did see some cases that were pretty that didn't deserve protection, and we wanted to make sure we struck that balance. But it was really a cross-section, which is why, literally, it didn't matter who I was talking to industry-wise, this came up. Even, at our own church, the issue came up because, as you pointed out, we want businesses to open up. And we knew early on as Chair of Business and Commerce, to get our economy back, we have to make sure businesses and churches and all parts of our society have those safeguards to know that they're not going to spend what is very, very precious resources after a year of a pandemic on litigation that in some cases is just frivolous.
So were there examples of employees filing suit against employers saying, I want to come back to work, but you guys are just not careful enough where I feel safe enough?
I am not aware of the specifics on that, Mark, but I'm sure with 650 cases, we're going to have things across the board, literally everything. And we just, to get to where we were before the pandemic, I know as a business person and who has salespeople out there that there are just some accounts, they don't want my salespeople even coming in yet. And it's not because they're afraid of the salespeople. They're afraid of the litigation that could come And so they're measuring their risk and limiting opening up their businesses to pre-pandemic standards because of potential litigation.
Gotcha. So some of it might be wayward, rogue customers, and God bless customers, we all need them, who might weaponize something that happens to them, even if a company is doing due diligence, being as careful as the guidelines say, et cetera, but somebody pops up with a raging case of COVID and decides to turn it into a lottery ticket.
Right, and then the owner could be subject to, well, you didn't run this customer out, or you didn't control the environment well enough.
Lord.
And so, we've been around long enough to know that pretty much anything you can think about suing about, somebody's going to file suit on it.
No, say it isn't so.
No, it is so. And that's why we need some reasonable protections within the law. And that was the intent behind this. And I am thankful that we were able to. I didn't want this to be a partisan issue, because opening up our economy, protecting our businesses, getting our jobs back should not be partisan. And we were very, very fortunate in the Senate to able to get bipartisan support on this issue, which I think, shows you that the state of Texas is different, right? You would never have achieved that at the federal level. And we are different, and our economy means a lot to us. We understand that's what keeps insurance. That's what keeps people's jobs. That's what keeps food on the table. And that was our focus in this legislation.
It is Kelly Hancock, District 9, that sort of Northeast Tarrant, North Richland Hills-ish, mid-cities magnificent vibe. So a couple of other minutes. Let's cover a couple of other things.
Sure.
So many states getting a lot of attention for passing legislation about the current wave of transgender stuff. A couple of things that we hear is making sure that our daughters don't have a biological male in the lane next to them at a track meet. Right. And Arkansas, most notably, with the absolute whip coming down on these horrific surgical and hormonal procedures that block puberty. I want Texas to have all of that. How are we doing?
We're moving, and in fact, a number of those things are priorities within the Senate, and so we are at that point that you've got House bills coming over and you got Senate bills coming over. In fact, the alcohol to-go bill that was so popular, the House bill's already over here. We're going to sub in, which is what we have to do in committee hearings, because we've already heard the Senate bill. We'll sub in the House bill and start moving that. So this is a point in time you're going to see some of those things start moving very, very quickly. In fact, the transgender bill is also a low bill number that the lieutenant governor put in place, which means a top priority for him and the Senate.
How low a number was alcohol to go?
It wasn't a very low number, but it was still very popular.
It was low for me. Right. No, I'm teasing. I mean, I've hated every minute of COVID. I've hated the restrictions. I've hated it. But after all the dust is settled, if I could go to Micosina's parking lot and come away with a burrito and a margarita, hey, well, at least there's a silver lining.
Well, and Mark, I'll tell you, we had passed legislation for third-party delivery services. Yeah. And so that's when I approached the governor when this first hit, and it was easy to convince. I said, look, we've already passed legislation that allows a Grubhub and a Uber Eats to pick up a margarita with the Mexican food and deliver it to somebody. Why can't they just pick it up themselves? And that's why you saw that move so quickly, because we had already passed legislation making sure Texas was on the forefront of some of these new changes in our economy.
Exactly right. Texas Senator District 9 Kelly Hancock on the Twitter at KHancock4TX. K Hancock, the numeral 4TX. Always a pleasure, sir. Thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. We always love having you on.
Yeah, God bless, Mark.
You bet. Take care. Thanks, Kelly Hancock.